Hello friends, welcome back to Feni for the Soul. Today I am going to introduce you to a very esteemed author, the Delhi-based Rakhshanda Jalil. Rakhshanda Jalil is a noted author, translator, and literary expert. She's written many books, but one of her books, "But You Don't Look Like a Muslim," that was published in 2019. Got a lot of good response. So Rakhshanda was in Goa recently, and she kindly spoke to Feni for the Soul about why she feels that Muslims are insecure in India in present times. Not just Muslims but minorities also. It's a very frank interview. Sit back and listen to it. Rakhshanda, good afternoon and welcome to Goa Arts and Literature Festival yet again. So your inaugural speech was very hard-hitting, and you took a very important topic about how in modern day India, 75 years after independence, Muslims still feel unsafe and insecure. So can you extrapolate a little on what your personal experiences have been?
I'll modify that. It's not a question of still. I think they were not feeling, my parents and my grandparents, when they chose to live on in India in 47, chose not to go to Pakistan. It was not out of fear, it was out of a sense of belonging, a very clear sense of belonging, right? And there was no fear then. I think they lived lives which were not marked by fear. There were occasional sporadic communal instances, even after 47, but I don't think there was any fear in their lives. Coming to my parents' generation, again, I don't think there was any fear, and they raised us, my siblings and I, to hold up our head and to believe that we belong here just like anybody else. So I'll come to your use of the word still. I think there was no still. It is a new phenomenon. I think the Muslims in India are beginning to feel fearful now. I don't think my parents or my grandparents' generation felt the way I did. They had more reasons to, because it was immediately after the gory incidents of partition, and yet they did feel the kind of marginalization, exclusion, othering that I do 75 years later. So that, I think, is a very chilling realization, not just for me as a Muslim in India, but I think for all of us.
In your keynote address on the inauguration day, you also mentioned that increasingly on social media, in the neighborhoods, schools, colleges, even your neighborhood gardens, you hear this, anti-Muslim sentiment, venom being spewed, so to say. So can you,
Yeah, these instances are random. They are seemingly not related, but if you join the dots, you see them as part of a narrative that is emerging, a narrative that is gaining ground among the common people, among people who draw their information, rightly or wrongly, from a variety of sources, often from social media and so on. And I think in a sense it is a lot of misinformation that is swirling around, that is feeding this larger narrative. And if I were to, let's say, put a post about a book that I may have translated from Urdu, I'm quite used to this now. There will be comments saying, go to Pakistan if you have to talk about Urdu. And I say, why should I go to Pakistan if I have to talk about Urdu? Urdu is one of the scheduled languages, 22 official languages mentioned in the schedule. It is one of the languages we see written on currency notes. So Urdu is an Indian language. Why do I need to go anywhere if I have to talk about it? So I think the filters are all off on social media, and people say anything. I think even in daily discourse, even in everyday conversations, we see those filters going away, and that fig leaf of secularism that held us together for very many decades after 47, I think that fig leaf is going away. So the random bits and pieces of conversation that you hear here and there, whether it's people's social media posts, whether it is their views that I add either in the privacy of their homes or in public spaces, I think that something that held us together for all these years, through difficult years, through turbulent years of nation building, I think the glue that kept us together, my sense is, was an innate belief in secularism. I think that is being rattled by a very muscular majoritarianism that is saying that no, हिंदुस्तान में रहना होगा तो ऐसे ही रहना होगा, the way I want you to stay.
In fact, you said also in your speech that keynote address that the Rath Yatra possibly was that turning point where Pan India,
I was old enough to remember that in 1990, and so I see that as a very defining moment in recent modern Indian history. I see that as a moment where state resources were mobilized, where a nationwide movement came into being, where it became suddenly all right to say that, to vilify a certain one community. People may have harbored resentment or hostility or a sense of other for, let's say, Muslims in India, but this overt hostility wasn't really there in the years preceding 1990. I personally see the Rath Yatra as a movement that normalized hate. It gave a legitimacy to a very muscular form of nationalism, Hindu nationalism, which said that, we have to undo the wrongs of many, many centuries. And all of that got centered on the Ram Janmabhoomi movement for the demolition of a structure and the building of another structure in its place. So the kind of pan-Indian reach the Rath Yatra led by Mr. Advani had, I think that was a very defining moment in our history.
In fact, you also mentioned that affluent, well-heeled Muslims may not find it so difficult, but the poorer, illiterate Muslims, their sorrow is rather sharper.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something interesting, because it's there in the public domain that meat sellers in northern India, if you're on the path to some temple shrine, they've been asked to close down and all that. And you also mentioned something about imams in. So can you give some more examples?
So these examples abound in many ways. I actually also said that while somebody like me who has advantages of education, of living in a gated community, of cushions that protect me in some way or the other, if I feel threatened, if I feel fearful, then imagine the fear of those who don't have these so-called privileges that I have. Of course, I later go on to question those privileges. Yesterday, I talked about how even those privileges can be brought to naught if a crowd comes and says, say Jai Shri Ram, and if you don't, you can be lynched. Or show me what is the meat in your fridge, and if I'm asked to produce what meat I've kept in my fridge. So in that sense, yes, I have some privileges. But imagine those who are doubly marginalized by poverty, by illiteracy, right? Those Muslims. And they are daily wagers, or they work as electricians, plumbers, garage mechanics, quilt makers, kebab sellers, biryani sellers, And I don't know whether it happens here in Goa, but north, I know a lot of service providers who, especially those who work as domestic helpers, often don't give their real Muslim sounding names. Instead, they give another name which is not Muslim sounding, because they are fearful that they will not be employed. And this is fairly rampant, it's not an isolated instance. Then there are people who festoon their carts. There could be vegetable sellers or fruit sellers, and they will festoon their carts with saffron flags. We saw this during COVID. A completely, unsubstantiated rumor was spread that Muslims are spitting on the fruit, and Muslim fruit sellers are spitting on their fruit and selling it, and this will in turn help Corona to spread. why would any food seller of any religion spit on their food? I've heard of people spitting water, but why would it be so? In Kerala, there was Thuppan Halal, a whole campaign against Muslim vendors of street food vendors, that they are spitting in their food to sell it. So these sort of things are, I think, manufactured, and they're manufactured just to hit small Muslim businesses, because commerce is a driving factor in many ways. So there are ways and means of hating any community. One of them is by, of course, by demonizing them, and the other is by hitting their businesses, hitting them financially. So we had some riots in Gurgaon in 23, and there we saw that people who traditionally plied their trades in a certain locality, in a sort of an urban village in some part of Gurgaon, they were quilt makers, they were people who fixed cots, there were people who did seasonal work like, cotton-filled quilts in winter, that kind of thing. And their businesses were destroyed, their shops were set on fire. Now, they don't have savings, they don't have ways to start anew. So if their shops, their homes, their businesses are set on fire, they don't have the wherewithal to start afresh. Yeah? And coming to recent times, we see this in Assam, but we see its implications everywhere. Any Bangla-speaking Muslim is targeted. Now, all Bangla-speaking Muslims cannot be from Bangladesh. It defies sense. But a narrative is made where it is being said that we will recognize them from their speech. But the point is, there are Bangla-speaking Muslims in West Bengal. There are parts of people from Bihar, who have migrated to, let's say, Bengal or that vast region there, Assam for that matter. But they are not infiltrators just because they look Muslim, because they have a topi and they wear a beard and their women dress in such a way, and they happen to be speaking Bangla. Why must we assume they're Bangladeshis? And in Delhi recently there was a big scare amongst people who work as domestic helpers who live at the fringes of these smart Tony colonies, and they come to work as drivers, as maids, as hires, as cooks in people's homes. And suddenly they just all disappeared, either for the SIR to make sure that the names are there on the rolls, or because they were being targeted by their neighbors in these shanty towns where they live, and they were accused of being Bangladeshi infiltrators. So if we are treating people who are citizens of this country, they speak Bangla, but they live in Assam, Bangladesh, or West Bengal, or Bihar, and yet they are viewed with suspicion. I think this is very worrying. Instead of being compassionate about this, we are so bent on pushing them out, and they are already at the bottom of the socio-economic pyramid. Where will they go? They are already at that bottom. Where do we want to push them?
Actually, I was going to ask you a very elementary question. This is so far away from what our founding fathers initiated in 1947. You had such a secular government in place, and you had the likes of Maulana Azad in the cabinet, and so many others, and their voices were heard, and they were powerful politicians. And we have come to this kind of a stage now. Where do you think we are headed, Rakhshanda? I mean, from your...
It fills me with a lot of dread, Rahul, frankly. It fills me with enormous dread, misgivings, worry, anxiety, that what is the India I'm leaving for my children, who are young adults today, but by the time they are there, they have families of their own, I wonder how they will feel, and it fills me with a lot of disquiet. I see no other option. I don't belong to the school of thought that says that flight is the option. I don't see flight. Where will we go? This is our home. Why should one go anywhere? This idea of belonging that the DALF stands for is an article of faith for me personally. But yes, despite that very strong sense of belonging, there's also a great deal of disquiet. Because, it should not be left to minorities, any minorities. I'm not talking of a Muslim only, any minority, anybody who feels that they are not part of a larger scheme of things. It could be forest dwellers, Adivasis, people with alternate sexualities, it could be Christians, it could be anybody else, Muslims, yes, women for that matter. It should be left to the minorities to speak up for the minorities. The problem is, you mentioned Maulana Azad in the Nehru's cabinet. I'm saying to you, Rahul, why should we go looking for Muslim leaders to speak up for Muslims?
Yeah.
Why cannot the elected representatives of the people speak for all the people that they represent, all the people in their constituency?
Irrespective of their religion.
Irrespective of religion. So I've never been one for religion-based or caste-based politics. I'm not saying that the Muslims of India need a Muslim leader. I'm not saying that at all. I've never believed in that. I'm saying the person I cast my vote for, in all good faith, must watch out for my interests, whatever my interests might
Absolutely.
be. It could be education, it could be sanitation, it could be electricity, it could be simply the safeguarding of my physical well-being and safety.
Yeah.
So it could be any number of things that constitute the idea of well-being, right? And I think the whole point of a democracy is that the people you represent watch out for you. Why are we expecting people from a community to watch out, safeguard our interests? Why are we expecting our safety or our mental health or our fear to be of concern only to leaders, so-called leaders from our community? I think that is essentially a flawed position to take.
Oh, thank you so much, Rakhshanda, for this interview.
Thank you, Rahul.
Bye.